Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Devy to Dynasty Film Room podcast. I'm your host, Matt Jackson. With me, as always, I've got my brothers from another mother, Matt Cooper
What's up?
and Matthew Rupert.
How's it going?
How are you fellas doing tonight?
A little under the weather, but I'm so excited to talk about these prospects that I just couldn't miss. Powering through.
Well,
Let's
we're
go.
glad
I'm
that
also excited, man.
we're glad that you chose to power through with us. I can't imagine talking to these guys without getting your intake on it. So I'm excited to dive in to these prospects tonight. Of course, tonight we're continuing back on our Inside the Prospect series, looking at the wide receiver position, as Rupert just alluded to. If you guys are interested in watching the film that we watch as we break down these prospects, we get it from the Dynasty Nerds Film Room. You guys can get the all 22 film on the Dynasty Nerds Film Room. If you use the code COOP, that'll get you 15% off. So if you guys want to dive into the film, make sure you guys are doing that. And yes, Cooper had to get the 15% off right this time. We're excited to dive into these two guys tonight. One guy that's getting first-round NFL draft buzz, and rightfully so, and then another guy that's been a big riser, I think, since the Senior Bowl. Of course, that is LSU's Brian Thomas Jr. and Georgia's Lad Mcconkey. And I'm excited to dive into these guys. And I figure, hey, why not we go ahead and shoot big and take this big first-round prospect right off the gate? And that's Brian Thomas Jr. He's a 6'4", 205-pound junior. Was a former four-star prospect, the number 9 wide receiver in his class. Didn't really do much in his first 2 seasons, only 359 yards his freshman year, 361 his sophomore year, but really exploded onto the scene this year with 1,177 yards and 17 total touchdowns, which I believe, if I'm not incorrect, was up near the top of receiving touchdowns this season. So I'm excited to dive into him. And as we'll do, the first thing we'll talk about is route running. And I'll start with you, Coop. What did you see about Brian Thomas Jr.'s route running?
Yeah, so this was one of the harder evals I think we've had all year, at least for me, all year, because when you're scouting, you're looking for patterns. And with Brian Thomas Jr., it was like I'd see these moments of really, really high-end route running, and then moments where it was frustratingly bad. And so it's hard to find patterns there. And it's like the only thing that was consistent was inconsistency. But I will say there were flashes of really high end route running. I mean, there were a few moments where it was like, wow, like if he was doing this every snap, I would be in love with this guy doing this at 6'4", against the press at the stem of the route. I mean, he just had these moments where he just dusted guys, and it was like, wow, that was really good. And so I think he's been well coached. I think mostly he's got some pretty good technique. He definitely has some high-end movement skills. There's a lot to like. One note that I did make, he excelled with stutter and go routes where he would throttle down and then re-accelerate, because he would re-accelerate in the blink of an eye, sunk his hips really well to stop, and then re-accelerate in the blink of an eye. And he dusted guys on those routes. He did not excel as much, I noticed, when he needed to stick his foot in the ground and make a very snappy or sudden cut at the stem of the route. So his lateral movement was not as good as his stop-start movement in a straight line. What I noticed, especially against press coverage, he would win leverage right off the snap. So if he wanted to get inside, he got inside. If he wanted to get outside, he got outside. He'd get the DB on his back. He'd stack him. He's got the guy playing from behind the entire route, playing catch up. And all he's got to do is make a really sudden cut, and that guy's going to go flying by him, and he's going to be wide open. And he just doesn't make that sudden cut. It's like it's rounded off, and the DB's able to catch back up. So I noticed that a bunch of times. It's like, man, he's doing so much right and then just not finishing. So definitely a lot to work with, though, in terms of when an NFL coach gets his hands on this guy. It's not like he's starting from nothing. It's not like the guy's raw or not a good route runner. There's going to be a lot to work with, and definitely some coachable things.
Yeah, I think the word inconsistency describes him really well because, like you said, he's not a raw prospect. He does a lot of things really well. And at his size, he does a lot of things really well for his size. I really liked his release package. He's got a pretty complete release package. And I think a lot of that comes down to his speed, right? This guy is a fast wide receiver, and you can see it all over his film. One thing that I really noticed, like you said, I noted his start-stop ability, his ability to, to pick up speed fast after a quick stop, and that's where he excelled. Right, he ran a lot of routes really really well, but again, like I said, just the inconsistencies. I really noted on routes that he had to have quick feet, kind of stutter and turn around or break to the outside. Those were the routes that I really felt like he slowed down a lot, and on instances where he would have had 4 or 5 yards of separation, a DB caught up to him because he wasn't exploding out of those routes as well as you would have liked him to. Rupert, did you see any of this? Well, I know you maybe have a different opinion when it comes to his route running, but what did you see when it comes to this?
I saw the exact same thing. He has all the athleticism to be a really great route runner, and I agree. Like, he's not raw. Like, he's got the ability. What I noted was he just didn't have consistent effort. I feel like the bad routes he ran is because he just kind of ran it lackadaisically. Like, I noticed some, stutter and go routes where he's just kind of jogging off the line. Like, he's not like acting like he's going on 9 route, then stopping subtly and re-accelerating. He would do that sometimes, but it just seems like if he had it in his head, like he wasn't getting the ball, just, kind of ran it, with pretty poor effort. So I feel like he's going to be a guy like these interviews at the combine and visits are really going to make or break his stock. I feel like, GMs and coaches really need to kind of get in his head and kind of see where he's at. But it's plain as day. Like, he has all the physical ability of, any wide receiver. And, 6'4" to be able to run like that is pretty incredible. He put the fear of God in some of these DBs.
Yeah.
So
Rupert, I saw
really interesting prospect.
Cooper, I saw you nod your head when Rupert was mentioning the effort level. Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I made some of the same notes. You could definitely tell that there were some plays, and I'm not in the room, I'm not in his head, so it's hard to say, like, is it just inconsistent effort and it's as simple as that, or was it like he knew that he wasn't getting targeted on that play, or it wasn't designed for him, or maybe it was a run play and he's supposed to be a decoy and he's stretching the field for somebody else. But I definitely made some of the same notes, and even more than just the route running, I noticed some really questionable effort as a blocker. I mean, there was one play they got in the red zone and they ran it probably 5 or 6 times in a row, and they had him in. And they actually had him in line as a blocker. They didn't have him split out wide, and he was kind of. It's hard to describe without actually showing you the play in a film breakdown, but basically it was like he would take a step or two forward and like play patty cake with his man and pretend like he was giving some effort, but he was like not wanting to stick his nose in there and get physical and get in the trenches. And one play in particular, it was almost identical to the George Pickens play that went so viral with Jaylen Warren, where Jaylen Warren would have had the touchdown, but George Pickens didn't want to bother blocking for him. It was like this hole opened up and the running back was on the second level and Brian Thomas was out in front and he had his back turned, so he couldn't exactly see what was going on with the running back, but he just kind of disengaged on his block and let his guy go. And actually the running back kind of squirted through to the second level, and who was right there to make the tackle? It was the guy that Brian Thomas Jr. was supposed to be blocking, and his running back got blown up. And it was frustrating at times. Like, I was getting mad watching the film, like, dude, come on.
Yeah. You would think somebody
You're
his size,
6'4".
Like 6'4", 205, you should be able to block better than you're showing that you. And I guess part of that is just his effort level, right? And we can't get inside his head. We don't know what he's thinking. So I'm not going to downgrade him, I guess, horribly for it. But like, it is still a point of concern where like you're that big and you're not just plastering guys, like so like pancaking guys on the field. Like, I did notice that, and I know we were going to get to blocking in a minute. So I just wanted to concur with you, agree with that.
Yeah, I noticed the exact same thing. I feel like in run blocking, he just did not care at all. I did notice, however, every time like they threw a screen to Malik Neighbors, he was blocking his tail off. So it seemed like he was, like, Malik's my guy, I'm going to go block for him. But those were like the only times where I'm like, I really like the effort level on that block. But yeah, I had a similar play where they're in the end zone or red zone inside the 10-yard line. They had him in tight. And he just kind of like put his hands out and then spun out like, nah, I'm not going to block this guy. And then that guy absolutely blew up Jaden Daniels trying to run on a quarterback draw. Yeah, that was really disappointing to see the effort level on the run blocking.
For sure. Well, moving on, because we're gonna talk about his ball skills, and this is something I feel like I might be a little lower on than you guys. I'm not sure. I'm excited to talk about it, especially when it comes to his hands. I felt like on the film that I watched, he was more often than not he would extend to the ball sometimes, but he was a body catcher a lot. Didn't really extend well to the ball in a lot of the film that I was assigned, and I mean because of that, because of him not extending to the ball, because of maybe some of his physicality and not really hand fighting the way you want him to, he had at least 3 or 4 drops on the games that I watched. So I think his hands were a little bit of a concern that at least I marked on my film. Rupert, did you notice any of this, or what did you see when it come to his ball skills, his skills at the catch point?
Yeah, I thought this was a strong suit for him. He has really good body control to kind of be able to, leap and time his jumps. He always seemed to kind of high point it on the games I had. I didn't make any notes of him body catching uh, on the games I watched. I watched Florida State and Wisconsin, so I gave him well above average on ball skills.
Yeah, I'm gonna fall kind of. What'd you say, Jackson?
I said time to pick. Who you agreeing with?
No, I'm just gonna fall right in the middle. So, I did not notice any body catching. I made a couple notes that it looked like he did a good job catching with his hands, extending out. Looked like a natural hands catcher. So, and I didn't see any drops on my film. So those concerns that you had, at least. So now we got 4 games because I watched Alabama and Florida. So add in the 2 that Rupert watched, which were different games than what I watched. That's 4 games where neither of us noticed a drop or a body catch. That's a pretty good indication there. I did note some of the same concerns that you did, Jackson, in terms of the physicality and the hand fighting. It was almost non-existent. And I felt like, whereas you would want to see a guy that's 6'4", I mean, that's part of his strength, part of the appeal for him as a prospect, right? Is that he is so big. And yet I never saw him play bully ball. In fact, I saw him get bullied a lot more often than I saw him play bully ball. I did. There was no like swatting, get off of me, create space at the catch point when he's not open. I felt like he was a little bit. I hesitate to use the word soft, but he wasn't as aggressive or physical as I wanted him to be, particularly at the catch point. I think I only saw 2 or 3 contested catch situations in the 2 games that I watched, but I didn't see him come down with any of them. So I didn't feel like he had a drop issue or a hands issue, but I wasn't pleased with the physicality at the catch point.
Yeah, and I think part of that could come down to I was watching the Arkansas game, and a lot of that was let's face it, Jaden Daniels didn't look great in that game. So I think part of that had to do something with his maybe he was having to come back to the balls a lot, and he was just dropping because they weren't placed correctly. So I'd be interested to dive into y'all's games and see if that was something that played a part in that. But one thing that I did think that he did really, really well moving on is his acceleration. I mean, this guy goes from 0 to 60 in a hurry. I mean, he is super fast. I think this is probably one of his best traits. Was his speed, his acceleration, his ability to take the top off the defense and really threaten the defense vertically. I didn't see a lot of yards after the catch, but I did see him getting open deep down the field a lot. What did you guys see when it came to his acceleration, his elusiveness, those traits?
A+ athlete. He's going to destroy the combine, and he's going to get even more first round buzz. He's just such a fluid athlete. He kind of looks like a gazelle, just effortlessly accelerating, long stride, destroys DBs on 9 routes. I actually made multiple notes of like really good yards after the catch for him. Even though like it doesn't seem like, they kind of tailor their offense for that form because he was, so much more of a deep threat. But I had him, catching some crossing routes and kind of slowing down so that he could stiff arm a linebacker and spin and stay in bounds. And then another play, he kind of splits the nickel back and the outside corner on a non-route and then ends up stopping. They run into each other, and he accelerates off, beats the safety, who, if you kind of like pause the play, it'd be like, all right, safety will, get the angle on him, and he just doesn't. Just long speed for days, effortless acceleration.
What about you, Cooper?
Yeah, I really, like Rupert mentioned, he was used as such a downfield threat. I didn't see him catch almost anything like at or near the line of scrimmage where he would have an opportunity to even get yak. He was mostly a deep threat and that's not to say that he can't do stuff at or near the line of scrimmage. It's just not what they were asking him to do. That was clearly Malik Neighbors' role in the offense. And they even had a couple other guys too that were more in the gadgety role, and they were using Brian Thomas Jr. as a field stretcher mostly, and he was good at it. But I saw a few, like there was one play where he did catch it deep downfield, but he had to come back for the ball because it was underthrown. And because he had to come back for the ball, now there's a man in front of him where he would have had a walk-in touchdown, and he juked the shoes off of that man, and he still walked in for a touchdown. So I definitely saw some pops of yards after catch, but it wasn't something that I saw a ton of.
So here's the real question I think that needs to be asked when it comes to Brian Thomas Jr., right? He does a lot of things really well. There's some inconsistencies in his route running, but sometimes he runs really good routes. He's obviously got the speed. He's got the size, but there's some issues about his physicality. There's some issues about the way he breaks outside, his breaks in general, and how he runs at the top of his routes. He's getting first-round NFL draft buzz right now. When you guys are in your NFL draft, like in your rookie draft, so let's just pretend we're all NFL GMs right now. Are you feeling comfortable taking him in the first round of an NFL draft right now? I mean, where do you project him at as a player at the next level?
If I was the NFL GM, no way I'd be taking him in the first round just due to the effort level that I've seen. I feel like I'd be comfortable taking him in the second or third round. But as far as like first round, if I was the NFL GM, like no way I would, kind of risk my job on someone who has such questionable effort. But, if he aces, some combine interviews, we know he's going to, physically destroy the combine. So I can totally see him getting first round draft capital, even though I personally wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, late first, if he's in the late first and he lands with like the Chiefs or the Bills or something, I mean, like the ceiling is the roof or whatever Michael Jordan said. But the upside is enormous, and I definitely like him a lot more than like a Keon Coleman or an Adonai Mitchell. I'm very intrigued by him, mostly because the flashes of route running, right? There's so many guys in this class that are tall and fast, but the fact that Brian Thomas Jr. has flashed some really high level route running is very, very intriguing to me. Definitely concerns, like you mentioned, with physicality and effort level. And even the routes is not as consistent as you would want it to be. But I think that can be coached up. So I think I wouldn't be mad about back into the first round. But I would say in terms of my rookie ranks right now, the guy that we're going to talk about next, I actually am going to end up ranking higher, I think. And so for me, I would have Troy Franklin higher right now. I would have Lad Mcconkey higher. I would have Xavier Worthy higher. So probably you're looking at wide receiver 7, 8, 9 range for me in this rookie class, at least of the guys that we've studied so far. And I would definitely have him above guys like Coleman, Tez Walker, Adonai Mitchell. So it's a loaded receiver class. That's not a knock on him, but there's definitely some guys that I feel more confident in, just in terms of them being refined and ready to come out and produce right away, and less risk involved.
See, I think that's interesting because I know I would rank him below guys like obviously Harrison, Neighbors, Worthy, Troy Franklin. I don't know if I'd put Mcconkey above him yet, but that's why we're doing this pod. We're getting ready to break down Lad Mcconkey right now. So let's go ahead and do that. Looking at Lad Mcconkey, he's a 6', 185-pound junior, former 3-star prospect, and get this, guys, the number 187 wide receiver in his class, which is crazy because he way outperformed that, I think. Best season was, of course, last year. We had 762 yards, 7 touchdowns. Kind of took a dip back to his freshman production. Only had 478 yards and 2 touchdowns this year, which I think I might have saw both of them. I'm not sure. I think I remember seeing both of them. But let's dive into his route running like we did with Brian Thomas Jr. And I think he did really well in his route running. I really liked. He looked faster. We're going to get into this later on when it comes to speed. He looked faster than I thought he was going to. He ran some really solid routes. I mean, there was one route. I can't remember because I watched the same game film as somebody else, but there was one route where he had an absolutely just filthy start and stop combo. The ball was underthrown and he adjusted really well to it to make a good catch. But I mean, it was just a filthy route. And I saw him do this time and time again on his film. What did you guys see when it comes to his route running, maybe his release package, that sort of thing? I'll start with you, Rupert.
This is his, trump card, I guess. As per down definition of always open, he's hyper efficient with his footwork, never really takes like a wrong step. He's really quick in short spaces, strong legs with the jab steps. At the stem of his route, he's able to stop super quick and sink his hips, cut inside, cut outside, come back. He's really good on post routes as well. He really can run the full route tree. He may not be like the most athletic guy, but in short areas, there's going to be few that are better than him.
Yeah, I loved his route running. I thought, there were, I haven't counted. I don't know, a lot of times that I paused to make a note, like he was wide open, where he may not have necessarily gotten a target or the target may have been off. So he could have been, just for context too, you mentioned the production numbers, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns this year. He missed a significant chunk of games with injury. So he played 8 games, I think. So not, I don't know.
Quarterback play wasn't that great either. I mean, like I saw just what you mentioned. Like there were so many times where he was wide open, and he just didn't get the ball or he didn't get the target. So I think 478 is there's a lot more to it than just that.
There's a lot that I like about Carson Beck, so I don't want to get into like throwing shade on him. Any wide receivers you study, you're going to see plays that they're wide open, and maybe the ball wasn't designed to go there, or he's third in the progression and the pressure got there or whatever. So like, I'm not trying to throw shade on Carson Beck. I felt like Lad Mcconkey was always open. He was incredible, particularly when he was given cushion and he had the ability to get up there at the stem of the route with some space and manipulate the defense and put his foot in the ground and nod one way, go the other way. I mean, he was just juking guys out of their shoes. A little bit of struggle maybe against press coverage and some physical play when guys would hand check him. But especially when he was given room to operate, he was really good. And he was not just a slot guy either. I mean, he ran a ton of routes from the outside. He was winning deep down the field. I think his average depth of target was like over 12 yards down the field. His average yards per catch was like 16 yards per reception. So you're not talking about just this gadgety slot player. No. I know that it's easy to kind of make that assumption about him because he's a white guy. And there's a lot of huge players in this class, right? Like 6'3", 6'4", 210 pounds or whatever. He's 6 foot 185, which is respectable. He actually would have been one of the bigger players in last year's draft class because they were all tiny. But because this class is full of all these big X alpha type guys, it's natural to just like profile Lad Mcconkey as the slot dude. But you mentioned Rupert. He was a lot faster than I thought that he was going to be. He definitely was a little bit bigger and he lined up outside a lot more than I expected him to. So overall, I like Lad Mcconkey. I would rather comp him to a guy like Deontay Johnson than a guy like Hunter Renfrow. Like everybody wants to throw out the Hunter Renfrow comp. I think a guy like Deontay Johnson fits
I
him
think he's
a
more. I
lot
think
better.
he's more Cooper Cup than he is Hunter Renfrow. Maybe that's just, I don't know if we're making those comps.
I mean, Cooper Cup is like a ceiling comp. I hesitate to comp anybody to a guy that, like broken NFL receiving yardage records.
So the
So
Cooper Cup
that just feels unfair to Lad Mcconkey to put that on him. But
My comp, I'm curious what y'all think about this, was Doug Baldwin.
I kind of like that.
I don't know. I was not scouting players when Doug Baldwin was playing. I feel like I remember him being a yak guy, which Lad McConkey is, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I don't remember specifically like about Doug Baldwin as a route runner. I don't have specific memory of that. So
Here's my question for y'all, because maybe I saw it differently. I loved his route running. I loved his ability to sink his hips and to break off really sharp and just run solid routes. I felt like, and Cooper, you alluded to this a little bit, when he was pressed, when he didn't get a clean release and when guys were up in his face, I saw 3 or 4 instances of him getting pushed off route or even getting knocked down to the ground while he was running his routes. And this is moving on, I guess, to his ball skills. Like his physicality and hand fighting, I think that was his worst trait. It's not enough for me not to like be off of him, but it definitely was something that I'm concerned about, because when you get to the next level, DBs are faster, DBs are stronger. I'm personally worried about if Lad McConkey gets pressed, what's that going to look like for him? Because he's not the most physical guy in the class, and he was probably the worst when it came that I've scouted so far when it came to his physicality. Did you guys see this the same way? Am I looking at this completely wrong? I'll start with you, Cooper.
no, I mean I already made a note about it. I don't know if I would say he's the worst in the class with his physicality. I don't even know that it was definitively worse than Brian Thomas, who's like way bigger than him. I didn't feel like it was a strong suit, and there were definitely a couple plays that I noted where he was getting bullied, but I feel like I saw some plays too where he did win against press coverage. I don't think it's like this like super huge red flag, at least from what I watched.
Yeah, in the games I watched, it's not a red flag for me. I think 2 or 3 times in the Alabama game, they were able to get physical with him, but as kind of took that as it's going to happen. Like wide receiver's not going to win every time, and I felt like he won the majority of the time, and they tried to press him a lot. So I wouldn't call that a strong suit of his, but I also don't really see it as a weakness.
So maybe I'm just lower on him most. I mean, I did note a lot of times him getting pushed to the ground, but if you guys aren't worried about it, one thing that I did really like about him was his body control in his hands. He seemed to extend really well to the ball. He had really good hands. I didn't note any drops on his film from the games that I watched, and his body control. Let me guys tell you, for some of the throws that I watched where the ball was underthrown, he had to make an adjustment, like a diving catch, or really adjust to a poorly thrown ball. He did this really well. I thought that was a strength of his. I marked that as a plus in his favor, his body control in his hands. Did you guys see the same thing? I'll start with you, Rupert.
Yeah, same thing. Multiple diving, sliding catches he was making. One play really stuck out where the quarterback kind of had escaped to the right, and Lad pretty much, I think he ran like a post, and he had to come all the way back, and it was underthrown, so he had to really kind of dive low, and he was able to scoop it up off the ground and make the catch.
I think I saw the exact same play.
Yeah, I noted multiple kind of like sliding catches, and he did that at the senior bowl practices a lot as well.
What about you, Coop?
Yeah, made a couple of the same notes. Plucked a ball that was, he's coming on a crossing route, and the ball's thrown behind him, and he reaches back and plucks it. One that was underthrown, so he had to come back and kind of dive and catch it low at his toes, and he plucks it. So yeah, I mean he's not a big, huge guy that's going to go win a bunch of contested catches, but I thought he had very reliable hands and good body control to reach back and get stuff that's outside of his frame. I didn't see any drops. So yeah, overall, especially for a littler guy, I thought he had really good ball skills.
Let's talk about something that really was a huge strength of him, and that was his yards after the catch. I mean, we've already alluded to it a little bit. This dude was way faster than I think any of us came into the film expecting him to be. There was one play that I think is just the epitome of what he is, right? He runs a solid route, crosser over the middle. The ball is underthrown a little bit, so he had just back to the ball, catches the ball, jukes out two guys on the way to a touchdown. Showed great route running, showed great body control, and then finally his yards after the catch was on display. I mean, it was the full picture of Ladd McConkey. Love that play, and I think his yards after the catch is just another thing that sets him apart as a wide receiver in this draft class. He did really, really well in this department. Showed great elusiveness. Showed the ability to catch the ball and know what he was going to do with it. I mean, I love this when I saw Ladd McConkey play. What did you guys think in this area?
Yeah, same. He showed a lot of awareness, like especially in zones.
Yeah.
Like you said, like he would find the soft spot in the zone. He already knew this plan where he's going to get 12 extra yards of yak. Another really great play was, I think, a 40-something yard touchdown. He was running an over route. He kind of feels that there's no defender on the backside, so he just stops on a dime, turns back around, and sprints towards the pylon. And no one catches him. He has pretty good long speed. He's nowhere near like Brian Thomas like long speed, but he mostly wins with his short area quickness and being able to shoot guys and kind of know where to go. He has good vision, but he also has decent long speed where he's not going to get caught from behind every time either.
Yeah, this was a strength for him for sure. It was for Ladd McConkey. I mean, they were using him on tunnel screens. They were using him on jet sweeps. They were trying to find ways to get the ball in his hands. I was really surprised by this for a guy that is not necessarily known as being super athletic. He was sticking his foot in the ground and just juking guys out of their shoes. He was dropping stiff arms. He caught the ball and he turned into a running back. He was following his blocks. So I loved what I saw. I was pleasantly surprised, not only at how good he was at it, but how often it was like all over his tape. Whereas we said with Brian Thomas Jr. just a minute ago, it's hard to even say because he's just mostly being used down the field and they're not getting the ball in his hands that way. Not the case for Ladd McConkey. He was getting the ball consistently in those situations, and he was winning consistently in those situations. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy. This is why I just said, Jackson, that I would have him ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. because he's probably in the top 3 or 4 route runners in the class that we've studied so far. We all just loved his ball skills. He's great after the catch. I mean, these are the most important traits that you can look for in a receiver. And the only knock you might say, oh, well, he doesn't have the athletic upside. But again, I mean, we mentioned guys like Cooper Kupp. He's been a fantastic wide receiver one without having a ton of athletic upside. So if you're a great route runner and you're getting open and you're getting a high volume of targets and you're creating after the catch, like I think he's got way more fantasy upside than people are giving him credit for. Yeah. And I think he's going to be a top 40 pick in the NFL draft. Yeah. So for me,
I can see where you're coming from for that. Like, I guess I would only put Brian Thomas maybe above him just because of what the upside could potentially be for Brian Thomas. But I totally see where you're coming from. I'm not that's not a knock to Ladd McConkey. I liked him a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying for me, like I came away really like way more impressed with his film than I expected. Like I knew like, okay, I've seen some highlights from the Senior Bowl. I know he's shifty and he's got, I'm a sucker for route running. So I kind of knew I was going to like Ladd McConkey, but I didn't expect to fall in love with Ladd McConkey the way that I did. And I think the NFL is going to love him too. I think he's going to get an opportunity. I think he's got more fantasy upside than he's being given credit for. And for me, if I had to rank him right now, I would take him at the back end of the first round in Superflex drafts of the guys that we've studied so far. And that's not anywhere near what I'm seeing in terms of ADP and mock drafts. So I think I'm going to get a lot of Ladd McConkey shares this year, which makes me plenty happy because I'm excited about the guy.
Yeah, I think he has such a high floor. Like, he's such a safe pick. Like, pretty much guaranteed to get 80 receptions every year that he's healthy, I feel like, with his route running and ability to get open. So I feel like you're just, kind of getting a lock and loaded player on your squad.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm not too far behind. Like I would take him in the top of the second round. So like I'm right there with you. Like I'm not super, further down than you are. Like I still like him a lot. And I mean, you're seeing him go like, I mean, I've seen some mocks him going in the third round. I've seen him go in the fourth round like a few times. Like that's not what his ADP is. But like, of course, you're looking at a guy like last year, and I'm not trying to make this comp, but like Puka Nakua, right? I mean, you could pick him up in the last with almost the last pick of your rookie drafts this year, and now he's going for multiple first in rookie drafts. I mean, just because a guy's ADP is there, like if he shows the traits on camera on the field, like if he can run routes, if he's fast, if he's his yards after the catch are good, like his ball skills are good, like those are all telltale signs that he's going to be a good wide receiver. So I've got no problem taking him, in the top of the second round right now. I mean, that's kind of where I have him right now. Rupert, where do you have him at?
Yeah, same. I feel like I'd be comfortable taking him at the end of the first, top of the second.
Yeah, so I mean, just thinking about who we've studied so far, because I'm not going to comment on guys that we haven't. I will say, let's assume in a super flex league, we haven't gotten to quarterbacks yet, but let's assume there's 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks that are going in the first round of super flex rookie drafts because they went in the first round of the NFL draft. I don't think it's going to be more than 4. So you got 4 guys, and then Bowers, so that's 5, and then wide receiver wise, I'm taking definitely Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, Worthy, probably above him. And then right there, I mean, it's a tough call for me between Franklin and Lad Mcconkey. So you're talking about 10. And if you throw in our RB1 there, Brooks or Irving, I mean, I'm not taking him any later right now than 11 at the latest in a super flex draft. And that's assuming 4 first round quarterbacks. That's, putting him behind Franklin. That's putting him behind one of those running backs. So I'm pretty bullish on Mcconkey. I don't see myself letting him get past me in the early second round.
No, I think that's a great word for definitely our listeners. And, I mean, you guys are all hearing it. He's a guy that we would all are going to have massive shares on. So definitely go out and get you some Lad Mcconkey for sure. Well, that about does us for tonight's show. Cooper, do you want to tell the people where they can find you at on Twitter? And if they are listening to this show, like some of our listeners do on Apple Podcasts, where can they go to find us on our YouTube page?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Devy2DynastyFR. That's the number 2, not TO. And that's also the YouTube handle. So, again, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can come check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/@Devy2DynastyFR. Not only do we post the podcast up here every week, we post short video clips from the podcast. We're trying to get you some more film breakdowns. We did a Marshawn Lloyd film breakdown recently, kind of 10 minutes, show you all the strengths and weaknesses, stop, draw on the tape, all that kind of stuff. So definitely check out the YouTube channel. Leave us a sub, leave us a comment, leave us a like. And if you're on Apple, would love for you to leave us a review as well, if it's a good one. You can keep your 1-star stuff to yourself.
What about you, Rupert?
You can find me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter/X.
Twitter/X. And you guys can find me on Twitter/X at Devy Mad. Of course, like Cooper said, if you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And on that, we would love to have those from you guys. It's how we get this podcast seen. It's how we get this information to people that need to hear it. Of course, we'd love to interact with you guys on Twitter, answer any questions that we can. I'm excited to continue this Inside the Prospect series on the way to the NFL draft and upcoming rookie draft season. But we look forward to being back with you guys next week. Until then, we'll see you next time.